Tonight, we discuss what would happen if aliens revealed themselves to us. It's time to get uncanny.
It's time to get uncanny. It's time to get uncanny. It's time to get uncanny. It's time to get uncanny. It's time to get uncanny. It's time to get uncanny.
This Uncanny Earth is dedicated to the memory of Todd David Anderson.
Welcome to episode 175. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what we think would happen, the ramifications of societal, economic, educational, scientific, so on and so forth, if aliens did, in fact, reveal themselves, not so much invade. We've covered a lot of invasion stories before, and I think that the invasion angle itself is very, I don't know the word to use, oversaturated, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think that we as a species are, I think, past the whole invasion part of that. But at the same time, I think at some point it's a possibility to discuss and sort of get that out there. But for tonight, we're just going to be talking about what normally would happen in the case of alien reveals. And for the listeners out there, probably think of aliens more looking like us than some creature feature beef like from the 1950s. So there you go. That's what's on tonight's menu. First off, though, because of our good friend Todd David Anderson, who we miss every day, it's time for that part he loved. It's time for dad jokes.
Kicking it in. It's time for Dad Jokes. There we go. Good to go. Oh, before we kick that joke out here, just a quick shout out to everybody in the chat room. We've got Hike Mornack and We Coast Jones already joining us. And We Coast Jones says Independence Day was a documentary. LOL.
And Hike Warnecki says, "Hey everyone, what's up, gentlemen? Hope you guys are doing good tonight. It's a nice chilly night here in the OH10, as it always seems to be around this time of year. A little bit warmer though than it has been, so that's kind of nice.
Unseasonably warm.
If we can just sort of steamroll that into the old, and if we can just steamroll that into spring, that would be utterly fantastic."
Well, I mean, for you,
So-
Christmas is over, so you don't need to worry about your white Christmas. You can just be like,
No,
all
I'm
right,
good.
didn't get my snow, so we're all done.
That's
Christmas is over. Time to have the spring.
That's
Get
it.
the grill out.
That's 100%. Well, you know what? I would. It could snow between now and New Year's. Like
Just for
that's
the next couple
Christmas.
days.
And technically, like you could count Epiphany, which is January 6th, as
Yeah.
being the end of Christmas. So
Yeah.
I mean, it depends how you celebrate. Some people take their tree down on the day of Epiphany, January 6th. Some people don't.
Some
It
people
just
might
depends.
want a different reason to celebrate that day for reasons, so we should probably give them that epiphany and remind them that that's what happened that day, and not that other thing.
I don't even know what the other thing was. That's how unimportant that other thing was.
Good. Perfect. Because we're not that kind of show. I just wanted to be like,
No.
I don't want anybody out in the audience to be like, the day. I'm going to be like, no, we're not going there.
No, we're not. We're not doing
That's
that.
not
We're
what
not.
that means. It's a different
It's not
epiphany.
at all what that means. It's a
It's
different epiphany. Maybe use your Google machine and figure it out there. Genius. So I got it. It's going to be a nice groaner, I think, for everybody out there. But Did I ever tell you how rare it was to get proper cell reception in outer space? Well, that's because it's zero G.
That is a very 2021 joke, though. It's very
Yes,
cutting edge, very modern.
it's very, it's very, how the kids say, up to date.
I don't
It's
know how well I
very,
could handle that joke without slicing a finger.
you don't want to be too edgy.
I know. That 2021 edge, you know.
Yeah, it's a very edgy thing, I think, too, to deal with. Of course, as always, rest in peace to our good buddy Todd David Anderson. He loved the dad jokes, and so we keep the dad jokes flowing for you folks. See, we take the pain and misery for you folks out there in Dad Joke Landia. So hope you understand that. I hope you guys got to check out my live yesterday over in the Facebook group. That was about how NASA had pulled 24 to 25 theologians to talk about what would happen in the religious community if aliens were revealed. And it was pretty interesting. A lot of people, and I talked about this yesterday, I don't think there'd be much of a shakeup. I said that you're going to have those extreme folks that are going to be like, I think they're demons and I think they are, of the devil. Because I've heard that before. I've heard that people think that aliens are in fact demons, and you're going to have that, I think, in a lot of circles, just like they think the paranormal is demonic and this, that, and the third, whatever. But for the most part, I think that people would be okay with it, religious-wise. I mean, I know I said I would. I would 100% be okay with aliens. I mean, there's not to say that those weren't created. You know what I mean? That God couldn't create something like that. So, to
Even
me, I
some.
always.
No, go ahead.
What'd you say?
I thought you were winding down for a second. I was going to try to sneak in there. Finish up first.
Trying to get in there, trying to ride my paranormal coattails.
That's right.
But I think, like me personally, I would be fine with it, because once you really get into the amazing aspect of our planet and of our solar system, and you have that religious faith, it doesn't really bother me. Like, I'm not bothered by it, and I think that in the future, less and less people will be bothered by that. So, but go ahead, get your Zach is in the chat. What up, Zach? Zach Attack.
And to be honest, even some of those extreme ones that are kind of really like anti all that kind of stuff, even some of them kind of came around to the idea, but they cap it off by saying, "Oh, well, yeah, there's other things in the universe, but they're not saved like we are, and they're not going to heaven, and it's too bad. It's so sad." So it's like a really like superiority complex kind of thing, which is kind of, I mean, you get that with, unfortunately, a lot of faiths right now anyway, that we believe the true things, so that means we're superior to this and this, and it's not as widespread quite as it used to be. I mean, it used to be, we had crusades and we had Inquisition, and we had all this like violent things that happened on a regular basis because of those thoughts. But nowadays it's more kind of like, oh, you don't, I do, okay, cool.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, but with aliens, I don't, like I said, I don't want to use the term invading because that's been done to death. But with them peacefully coexisting, that does set up a lot of problems on our end as human beings that I don't think people like put a lot of thought into. I think they look at it like, oh, good, they're going to give us technology and that's going to make our society better. They don't weigh on the full aspect of what if it's a whole alien civilization. Can I crash on your Earth couch for just a few days? It ends up being, 1,000 years. So it's like, where does that stand in terms of aliens? So we're going to break some of that down today, because I think that isn't discussed as much. I don't think they really discuss the concept and ideas of what are the economic, what are the societal impacts, what are the population impacts. So, some questions to consider. Would society be able to handle the impact of extraterrestrials? And how would they impact things like food sources, agriculture, and burden on natural resources? Now, if the aliens bring their own energy with them, Can humans utilize it for their advantage as well? And what would the drain on the aliens and their ability to produce energy become?
It's an interesting question. And when you brought up this topic, and we brought up the fact that we're gonna try to stay away from the invasion idea. The thing that I thought of initially was that people don't consider that it could kind of be the opposite. Like, we don't often think that a species, we assume every other species in the universe, if they exist, that can make it here are going to be super advanced, right? They're going to have all this great technology and all these other things. But it could be that just it's not necessarily advanced, but just different, and maybe they're in kind of a bad spot. And it's like what was the movie called? It was what, Section 9? Is that?
Oh yeah,
that
Section 9.
Section 9?
That was my movie. That was the movie.
That's kind of what I think could be a potential thing. I mean, they could come here because, you know what, our planet's messed up, we're destitute, we can't invade you because we've got no weapons, we've got no willpower, we're just beaten down, so we just came here and now we're begging you for your resources because we don't have any other choice. Which is kind of like the invasion thing, but flipped, because then, yeah, they still need our resources, but they can't just take them because they're in a rough, tough spot. They're at the point weaker than we are, and I'm not sure how we would feel about that. I think that would be a bit more shocking and surprising than having a species come through and just be like, yeah, we're going to come through and take your stuff. What do you think about that?
Believe it or not, what you're talking about isn't possible, and I'll explain more of that. Not to be a jerk and try to distract your point, and you know what I mean, and be
I'll
mean
probably
about it.
still disagree on some level anyway.
It's okay.
Because,
You can,
but,
yeah,
I mean,
of course.
I'm interested in hearing the counter thoughts because it's a good area of discussion.
Yes, I agree. Like I said, it's not like I'm going to just call you a jerk and be like, that show's canceled.
No, you got to wait until you see me in person to call me a jerk.
Nice. Nice. I think I will do that. I haven't done that in a while. But the thing is, like, if they, let's say they're on our level, which what I found would indicate they're not, but I'll explain that as we go along. If they would end up bringing their own energy with them, how much of it can they reproduce? What do they have that can actually reproduce it? What does that need from our end? Does it need fossil fuels? Does it need dark matter? So on and so forth. And what would be the burn off of that, or the exhaust? What is that going to do to the environment? If they build plants and they manufacture this energy, then what happens? So that's something else to think of. Another thing, how does the workforce change from the announcement of aliens? I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking to yourself, workforce? Aliens? So much like Section 9, when they were living in what I would call it was basically a ghetto. But when they were living in the destitute area, you know, a lot of them didn't do any work. So what are they going to do here? Are they going to work? And if so, is it going to be, you know, are they already here? Now, if they're already here in the workforce, and, you know, that is what it is. If they're already here, then the population is already what it is. But is this something that we're going to have to add more extraterrestrials to the labor force? Then what does that become? And are they going to work for Amazon? But like I said, how many are already here? How many have to arrive here? If it's, say, like 5 aliens, let's say we come from another planet, we're just saying, hey, figured we'd reach out to you guys, drop you off some technology, and then we'll skedaddle. Or is it, hey, we don't have anywhere to go, our planet blew up, and we need a place to crash? So, I mean, and that's the thing, like, are they bringing a whole flotilla of them, or just like 5 or 6? Because that is a very important thing to add. Now, if they arrive and they do need that space, how do we in fact accommodate them? There's what, like 7 billion people on the planet now, ever growing?
Plus and growing.
Plus and growing, and not people like dying at a fast enough rate to equal a lot of things out. And I mean, I don't mean to say it like that, but you know, it's just statistically,
not like a emotional.
I want people to start dying
around here. No, nothing like that. It's just
statistically,
the birth rate is outpacing the mortality rate. I guess is the more like uppity way to say it, but it's basically what you said. It's people aren't passing away as quickly, even with everything else that's going on right now. I mean, a lot of people say, well, look at these numbers with this thing that we don't talk about, but it's still like drops in the overall bucket of how many
Yes.
human beings are born and reach adulthood pretty much every single day on the planet.
Yes. Yes. And then those resources need resources. So it's like, where do you start cutting people off? And with the alien or the extraterrestrials, where do they fit into all that idea of, well, we need to allocate certain resources to them because if we don't, then what happens? And if they're superior to us, if their technology is superior, they might hold up. Um, they might hold up or hold back that sort of technological advancement that could help us. And then they end up doing that. And then what happens then if the alien? Because what we're not going to talk about here, what people want to talk about is what are their birth death rates?
Mm-hmm.
Are they rabbits in essence and having multiple kids at a time? Are they dying fast enough so that there's still that balance? That's something you have to understand. And also, once again, that comes into play, how many of them are coming here?
Mm-hmm.
Are there going to be maybe, like I said, 5 or 1 million? You know what I mean? And if they, and the thing is, I don't think we would turn them away, especially if they crash land here.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do? Kill them? I mean, it's possible. But I guarantee we'd pick a couple and start doing some serious experimentation on them. I mean, that's human beings for you. I mean, you want the truth.
I mean, who's to say, honestly, that it hasn't even really happened that way? I mean, we got all these
That's
stories
true.
about, Roswell, Area 51, all that other kind of stuff, and a lot of that's sensationalized. But that doesn't mean that the events haven't actually happened somewhere else that we've never heard of, and those are just the fronts. Like, they let us talk about Roswell, and they let us talk about all this other stuff because there's nothing really going on there. But over here in Nebraska or over here in South Florida or something like that, they've got their special base or something like that. So, I mean, we don't know that hasn't even occurred.
And that's 100% fact. We have zero idea if that has occurred. Something else I think to take note of, too, is food-wise. What do they eat? Do they eat the same food we do? Do they eat the same thing that children do? Do their children is it the same thing? Do they have children? Does their child to adult cycle go the same as ours? Is it longer? Do they need more food? That's something that we need to really fully grasp before we sort of let them in, I would say. Mm-hmm. Another thing. How do laws come into play? Do they follow our laws? Do they have their own set alien laws? If they kill somebody, if they kill another human, obviously that'd probably be a murder case. But if they kill another alien, what is that? So how do we adjust our laws and our justice system to fit an extraterrestrial species coming to Earth? Like I said, 5 or 6, okay, you just put them under the human law. 1 million? Can you really do that?
I mean, we've already got problems of our own with that kind of stuff just in different cultures right now. And I don't want anybody to think I'm pointing any fingers or starting to get into any sort of, bigotry or anything. I just want to mention it. We've got criminal justice law that we have in the United States. It's different than criminal justice law you have in someplace like the UK, even though we borrowed a lot of our basis from that, which is also different from Interpol, which is international police, which is recognized with not all the countries on the planet, so not everybody even follows that, which is different from cultural things like Sharia law and this and that. And again, I'm not trying to, I'm not going to discuss that because that's not on the table. But what if it's something that's culturally something we have a problem with?
Yeah, then think about that.
Again,
what if they eat their babies if they come out deformed?
Yeah, and then you got to think, well, again, can we apply it to them not being us if they keep it within their own society? Or are we supposed to, tell them, hey, you got to assimilate if you want to be here. You got to be like the rest of us. And because we even have problems with that now. Again, we have issues with certain cultural things going on that we tell people you can't do that here because this country is different. But we're supposed to be welcoming and different things like that. So it's kind of tough
Right.
because there are other countries that are a lot more strict than that. There are other
Right.
countries that are like, hey, if you come here and do what you do in your country, we're just going to knock you off. No, we're not even going to think about it. If you do
Yeah.
what you do in your country, you come here and do that, you're gone.
You're going to go
never
to
hear from you again.
We'll put you under the prison. Like
Yeah.
and it's no big deal. You'll never see the light of day for the rest of your life.
So, I mean, we have that problem here, but not nearly quite that bad in some other countries. And again, not to point any fingers at anybody. I'm not, trying to rile anybody up. But with another species from a different planet coming with the same exact kind of situation, you're in the same area. You really don't know
Right.
how much your country's laws can apply to them. And some countries are going to be more pushy about it than others. And then what if they push back? Again, it also depends on numbers. What if there's only a few of them? What if there's
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands? I mean, if you try to push and they push back, then it's not going to go good for anybody.
And that leads me to my next question. Do the aliens go to war with the country they are housed in? Or, like the Amish here in Ohio and Pennsylvania, do they completely stay out of conflicts? Now, like he said, that works here in the States. You don't have to, you don't get conscripted. But in other countries, how does that play out? Especially if you have some form of power and things like that. Then what?
A lot of Middle East countries, and even a lot of European countries, have mandatory once you're done with your basic schooling, like your high school equivalent to here, you spend a year or two in their military. You don't have to make a career out of it, but you do have to mandatory spend a year. Like Israel's like that. Israel, I think it's what, 2 years. It might be more. It might be like up to 4 years because they're pretty real particular about that. Every single person who lives in Israel past a certain age is basically special forces.
I had a buddy from South Korea, and they had to do the same thing. Like when he was done with college, we were both in a marketing class together. And he was like, yeah, as soon as this is over, I got to go back home. I got to serve them. I think it was like 2 years for him. I think you told me it was like 2 years. I was like, oh, that's crazy, man. I was like, we don't do that here.
It's generally a 2-year compulsory thing in European countries and in a lot of the Asian countries, mostly because they don't have the threat of war going on every single day. I mean, I know we're dealing with whatever's going on with the Ukraine right now, but it's not the same as in the Middle East where
we're not right next door to the Ukraine either. So
right, and it's not like in the Middle East again where they're lobbing rockets at each other pretty much daily.
Right.
So again, the time frame might be a little bit longer for them just to make sure that you know what to do and you're fully trained in case they call you up. And they can call you up at any time. Here we have to go through the draft. We have to go through all that other stuff. And the draft has to be convened. Like you can't just call it up and be like, okay, time for the draft. Everybody go. It's Congress has to vote on it and all this other stuff. And it's not like a quick on-off switch. So again, how do we hold those standards to another species if we as a planet don't have an international framework for it?
Once again, and that's something that would have to be discussed because, once again, what if those aliens have the dominant weapons? And they say, hey, we just want to be left alone, we want to exist. And the country's like, no, you're going to go fight war for us. Okay, now we're going to bring the war to your country. You want war, we'll bring it. We have the necessary things to bring it. Also, where does it stand if they use craft that flies? Is that going to be, do they have to go by the airspace laws that other countries have? And what kind of confusion does that cause seeing it out the window of a plane? Pilot sees it, is like, oh my goodness, and then crashes. So it's things like that too. Are they going to allow these crafts to actually go off into space?
Yeah, just
or go off, fly around. You know what I mean?
Basic vehicular safety things could be completely different. Even if they have ground-based vehicles, like even if they have things that are basically like a car, they run on wheels and they have an engine and all that kind of stuff. Who's to say they've ever had anything like a speed limit on their planet? Who's to say they've ever had a limit on, you have to stay on the road? What if they just drive wherever they want, over the mountain, over this, over that, through somebody's
Yeah.
yard? You know, I mean, what if they're just used to it and they're just like,
Yeah.
whatever? And here we're like, no, you can't do that. But they don't, you know, how are we going to handle that? They could be completely different. Just imagine trying to wrangle all that kind of stuff, plus all the safety stuff, again, if you take it to aircraft.
Plus, what about the fuel that's needed to power these things? If they do have cars in that same vein and they don't use gas, now you have to build whatever refinery to refine that. Then you got to put little stations so they can get out of their alien vehicles. I mean, and this is assuming that they have to do. They might have a cube.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah,
makes the car run for 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, they could very well have like hydrogen cells or nuclear cells that are self-contained. They could have all these different things that last for hundreds of thousands of years. But then what happens if they get here and, oh, well, we're at the end of our 1,000-year life cycle on our vehicle's power source, time to switch it out. What do they do with that? Do they just throw it out? Is it done? Or what about leakage? What about,
Yeah.
you know, who knows what the thing is going to do once you take it out? Or what are they going to do with it? Do they dispose of it properly on their own planet? Or do they just toss it off into space? I mean, who knows?
So, yeah. Now, next, we're going to be talking about the political aspect of this. It's very short. I'm not going to go into the whole party thing or whatever. I don't really care about the two-party system. How would our politicians handle this information? What would they do with it? Now, most politicians are corrupt. I mean, it's just absolute power always corrupts absolutely. So most politicians are corrupt. They go into it maybe being innocent, maybe not. Maybe they're just seeking the power. So, once again, being that most politicians are corrupt, what do they do with the information? What do they broker with the alien species to create or to disseminate information? And what do they keep for themselves? And that's something we have to think about. You know, what would they tell everyone? That's the first thing that you have to understand. How would they desensitize us to this? Now, we've seen over the summer that different reports from government agencies were released. It wasn't really a big deal. It wasn't anything serious. But it was still like a little smidge. But once they're here and they're known, there's not really much you can't say, oh, well, they might be here. Well, I mean, if they're standing there looking at you, you know. Once the extraterrestrial species are assimilated into society, would they be able to vote? Would they be able to run as politicians? Do they look out for their own species? I mean, these sort of things happen even with human beings. Mm-hmm. You'll have politicians that'll look out for a race or an ideology or a party, which corrupting, once again. Mm-hmm. But you'll have these politicians that do this. What's to stop these extraterrestrials from doing the same thing? Now, I've heard that if these aliens do show themselves, that we would sort of morph into this one world government, which I think is utter nonsense. You have too many countries that hate other countries, and they're not going to be so quick to put those differences aside, in my opinion. Everybody says, yeah, the Earth would come together. Have you seen Earth? We don't do that here.
Have you been
we
here
don't
the
do
last
that
like 2 or 3 years? I mean,
have you been here the last two? Have you been here? You been here the last 4 years, 16 years? We don't do that. So that to me just, I mean, and that would be the perfect time to divide and conquer. I mean, doing something like that.
That there, whereas the earlier discussion kind of reminded me of Section 9, where we're at now with that kind of thing reminds me a little bit more of a TV show that was on when I was a kid, and they based it off of a movie. The movie was more about the aliens showing up, but the TV series was about them coexisting, and it was called Alien Nation.
I remember that.
And I
never watched it, but I remember.
Yeah, I never saw too many episodes of it. It was like a weird time slot, and I don't know. There was a lot to it. I just remember that there was one of the guys who was supposed to be an alien. He was a police officer and all that other kind of stuff. And people were like speciesist towards him and things like that. And then he was trying to like arrest people of his own species, and they accused him of being on the side of the enemy and things like that. So they had like alien gangers and stuff, and it was kind of like they made it kind of a reflection of certain like some of the racist problems we have in some of the bigger cities.
Right.
How some people will get into police force and, oh, you're betraying your people and this and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting concept. I might actually have to go back and watch a few. I'm sure they're pretty rough now. They're like early '90s kind of stuff.
Oof,
I'm sure
early 90s TV shows.
yeah, I'm sure it's pretty rough now to go back and watch it. But I think there might be some good correlation there between that and what we're talking about now. And if anybody out there has seen that and knows what I'm talking about, if you have any thoughts on that, let me know and make sure I'm not just like pulling it out of the back end of something. So I want to make sure that I'm not just like misremembering or making something more out of it than it is.
That was Morgan Mindy. Would to ask ourselves, would world leaders work with them to create policy that would affect human beings in a positive or a negative manner? If you pass laws saying that the aliens can't eat their babies, there's going to be a whole group of people that say, no, you're here on Earth, you can't, or you can't eat your babies, you can't do that. If they pass a law saying that the aliens can do that, then people say, no, you can't, so on and so forth. And then how would and then flip that? How would policy for us affect them? Mm-hmm. And that's and the things we're talking about. A lot of people don't think about this. They just think, oh, it'll be a kumbaya moment. The world will come together, bro. We couldn't come together for centuries and centuries. You look back in ancient history, we couldn't come together then. What makes you think we're going to come together now? And there's more of us. I think what you're also going to see happen too is the rise of more cults. You're going to have a lot of cult-oriented aspects like, what was that, Heaven's Gate, to where they worship these things. Mm-hmm. And there'll be a side that worships and a side that vilifies. Two extremes. Which brings me to the next part, science. What would aliens bring to the table as far as energy is concerned? Now I'm going to get to this point that I told you about earlier in the episode. Mm-hmm. It is said that a Type 2 or higher would be the only possible civilization that could come to our planet, and I'll explain why. A Type 2 civilization on the Kardashev scale can harness the power of their entire star. So, like our sun, they can harness the entire thing. And I'm not talking just solar energy, but full-on controlling the star. Now, a Dyson sphere is thought to be the main concept for how that would be possible. As the types in the Kardashev scale itself increase, the ability to manipulate energy and matter also increases. Now, if you guys want, run back over to episode 152 of This Uncanny Earth for an entire episode regarding Dyson spheres, stellar engines, and the Kardashev scale. So, when I was reading it, that's what I meant. Like, mm-hmm. If they're on the same level, they couldn't be lower than us, because if you don't have at least our technology, you can't even get into space.
But
so
again,
you're stuck.
That's according to our standards, though. I mean, and not to again, I don't want to. We're not going to get into a big argument about it, because the Kardashev scale is a really good. It's a really good hypothesis.
A great measuring point. Yes, it's a great measuring point.
Very good, and I don't want to blast any holes into it. I just also want to say that we, as a people, have a tendency to add our experiences to other things, and I kind of see it as a possibility of extraterrestrial space bums, basically. I think that's a possibility, that they just they didn't develop something on their own. Maybe they got it from somewhere. Maybe there was another species that they got it from, but they didn't know what to do with it right, so they're just traveling around, and then they got messed up somehow, and so they're here messed up. But again, that's another, it requires a lot of different other things to have happened, and it's not as cut and dry, so, I can't say that either one of us is really going to be correct on that, but I was really doing this. Yeah. I mean, and like I said, you're fine with what you said. We'll keep going in the direction on the assumption that the Kardashev scale is
yes.
how things would go.
Yes.
Just to keep it in everybody's mind, if you want some good thought experiments, that there's some other thoughts out there. But this is a good building block. It's
basically like, you have English and then you have different dialects of English. Mm-hmm. So this is basically like the main idea of it basing itself off the Kardashev scale. If they're interdimensional beings, that's a whole nother can of worms, but that would still rely on energy that we don't possess.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd still be something different. Maybe they fell into a portal and boom, there's one on Earth. I'm sure there's a portal somewhere that came from another planet, and maybe that's how they do things. I don't know, Stargate stuff. But that's still energy required that we don't have.
Yeah. Again, it's all. We just have to make assumptions, and that's what it is. We have to make certain assumptions until we're proven wrong otherwise, and that's just how it works.
Now, here's one that I took from the War of the Worlds aspect. What would the advancement for medical sciences provide to human beings based on alien technology? And that's not from War of the Worlds, but this medical idea is. Mm-hmm. So if they say, yeah, we're here, we can cure cancer, or we can cure AIDS, or we can cure Ebola, what impact does that have on our society? People now live longer, mm-hmm. right? And we've discussed this in our human augmentation episode, that if people live longer, there's going to be a bigger burden on resources. And I don't say that like I want people to start dying off, but realistically speaking, that's what has to happen so that there's not an overburden of resources. Mm-hmm. You can't just create infinite resources out of nothing. That requires building other things to create these said infinite resources, and you're still draining something, and there's still more people on the planet. There's still going to become overpopulation, and with people not dying as much, with the birth rate being increasingly bigger and the death rate shrinking, that's going to be an issue. Mm-hmm. So, and once again, with the alien population being on Earth, where does that take us? If they're here, and like we said, if it's 5, okay, there might be 5 here now, mm-hmm. but if there's hundreds of thousands, and they don't die and we don't die, that is just a burdening thing. We have people that have babies at alarming rates in the world as it is. Mm-hmm. You put on top of that aliens that have babies, and if they are a quick population society, then you're going to have situations of, okay, there's all this population, now what? Leading to wars, leading to famine, starvation, overpopulation, drains on resources. So at some point, we would have to either A, expel them, or B, figure out a way to go to another planet. And then all we're doing is just doing what they did. We're just going somewhere else. And then we just keep doing the same thing over and over, and it becomes very cyclical in nature.
And the other thing, too, with that, on the flip side is, and again, using your War of the Worlds example, which is another good indicator, because we didn't really beat the extraterrestrials.
No.
In that book, they
got a cold.
Yeah, they caught basically the common cold.
Common cold.
And so what then happens if they come here, we agree to let them be part of our society, we agree, okay, yeah, we're going to help support you and all that other kind of stuff. But then they start getting sick from something that to us has been like, oh, we don't even go see the doctor about this. Like, we go to the store and get a bottle of Robitussin, and you spend a couple days at home and you're good. I mean, but what if that's deadly to them? What if that's like near death all the time? Do we owe it to them to help their physiology to withstand it? Do we try to create like an antivirus that somehow neutralizes it? Like, what all will we do, and what will we be capable of in trying to help them, and would we be willing to help them to begin with? It's another great moral question.
And on the flip side of that, what if they bring something here that's normal to them but starts killing us off?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, same kind of thing. And they don't know how it affects us, so they have no idea why we're having so much trouble with it. But to them, it's just like, well, we went to the gas station and we got some Robitussin,
we got some alien tussin. Yeah, we got some alien tussin.
Yeah, very
interesting.
Put
some tussin on it. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, where do we as a species have to say, okay, and then what do? Do we divide our land up and say, okay, you can live here, but you can't come to our side. We can't come to your side, but you can stay here. If they do contact the same virus, if they're organic, that's playing into the idea. If they're organic, what if they're not organic? What if they are something like Bishop from Alien, who I think was a synthetic,
Mhm.
and they're able to reproduce. Then what? They might not catch anything. But once
Or
again,
their
you're going to
diseases might be something like a nanomolecular
like computer virus. Yeah,
and we get infected
yeah.
by nanites that don't know what to do with our system, and they start rewriting us into who knows.
It's a good question. I didn't think about that one, but they start turning us almost into them as an assimilation. But something that they didn't think about, coming here, they thought maybe like we think that, oh, okay, the aliens are us. So they're going to be able to accept our physiological sort of deficiencies. Maybe not deficiencies, but abnormalities, maybe. I don't know. And play that into something. Do you go see an alien doctor? Do aliens go to our doctors?
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to have to be colleges and universities specifically built for alien children or extraterrestrial children? Is there going to be certain supplies that they need that we have to pull from wherever our resources are? And our resources are finite. So what if they need those same resources to help their species or their people survive? But we need them for the same thing.
Even something as simple as sleep cycles can make a huge
Yeah.
difference. Like we need to sleep. And I know a lot of us, like me, I get my insomnia and I don't sleep that much. And some people are like, I got 4 hours of sleep and I'm great, and then they're falling off at work the next day. But what if, because we typically need between 8 and 11 hours of sleep.
I get about 6, maybe
Yeah.
if 6.
But again, the average is supposed to be, supposedly for the best health and the best awareness. But what if this is a species that only needs an hour or 2 hours of rest? That means they're going to be able to wake up and be super productive compared to us because they have so much time awake. On the other side, what if they're a species that sleeps for like 21 hours and they're only awake for like a brief period of time, but they need to do everything there. They need to work, they need to eat, they need to do this, they need to reproduce, and it's like that's every day. So how do you accommodate differences in that? Even if it's just a few hours difference can make a big change.
Do you have aliens work at like an Amazon, but it's an alien only Amazon? To sort of deal with that.
It's interesting because this is I get a lot of culture reminders from discussions like this. I read a short story called Sleepless some years ago, and I don't know who the author is. I don't remember. It's in a big compendium of great sci-fi stories, and there's a bunch of other more recognizable ones in there. But the Sleepless one was, and this one didn't deal with aliens, but the basic concept is the same. In that they had developed a new system that was experimental, where before your child was born, they could go in, edit the genes, which is something we're kind of dealing with right now. But they could go in and they could alter them in such a way that they didn't need to sleep. They never needed to sleep. They wouldn't get tired. They might get physically tired, in which case they might want to sit and rest a little bit, but they would never get mentally tired or mentally exhausted for any reason. They could just keep on going. And so they have a group that they put this through, and the kids grow up, and then they're discriminated against because they can do things for so much longer than other people. And all it is that they can stay up longer. They're not physically more powerful. They're not necessarily smarter. They're not, they're not any different, but they can stay up indefinitely. And so they can get more done. And because they can get more done, they can work harder. And because they can work harder, they put other people out of jobs and all kinds of other things. So it's another interesting story for people who want to kind of read up on the concept. But just think about it in the framework of an extraterrestrial species. I mean, they come in and they can do things that you can't. Nothing that's like scientifically crazy or anything that's like a special power, but it's just physically they're better at something. And there's nothing you can do about it because that's naturally how they are.
Maybe they work 36 hours a day, so the factories hire them, and instead they tell us no jobs for you.
Yeah. Or again, the flip side, they're worse than we are in some area, and we can't like fix it. So, but we're forced to give them positions in places that they're terrible at.
Yeah, they're forced to work at McDonald's for 4 hours a day, and they always get your order wrong because their food doesn't make any sense to them.
So, I mean, it's again,
It's
sounds
funny, but it's true.
Oh yeah,
It's funny, but
yeah,
it's true.
it sounds funny, but it's something to think about. You could just think about the disruption that either one of those scenarios would cause.
And I think too, what we have to look into is the idea of, okay, how do they spend money? What is their ideal way of gaining goods? Is it a bartering system? Do they have a society that was based on that or is based on that? Do they have a monetary system? Do they, what are we to gain and what are we to lose by including them in our economic system? Now, and then how does that play off into things like the stock market? How does that play? You know what I mean? Because now you're going to have an influx if the aliens are intelligent and they're not some just like, hey, bro, dude, aliens, man. And they know how to split atoms easily and they can mess with dark matter and they can do all this. What is going to be the impact of once the aliens put their companies, or facilities out there, is that going to bankrupt the petroleum industry? Now, obviously, they will suicide themselves because that's what happens sometimes when you mess with big corporations. But if they're more powerful and more dominant, then all these companies are going to go out of business. That's people that have lost jobs. And if the aliens are more productive, then that leaves us with a bitter taste in our mouths. I mean, we've all seen those guys that say, I worked 25 years in one job and I was able to retire off of it. And you have guys that came in under them that were like, I was there 15 years and they let me go. They closed the plant, shut it down. Mm-hmm. Guys that are there, 5 years, shut it down. You know what I mean? And so it's like, is that going to be, are we going to end up going to war or going, killing aliens off because, hey, we need to provide for our families? Well, they got to provide for their families. So it turns into a mess. And people always want to look at the sunny side of things, but then they always forget how human beings act. And you only need study history to see how human beings will act in certain ways. And that's just how they act. They don't, our first thought is preservation of the species. That's always been our first thought for the most part of our society. How do we preserve our way of life, especially against something that is very foreign to us as human beings? It's not going to be we sit around and sing Kumbaya, because you're going to have, and here's another thing I'll bring up, mating. What happens if an alien male has intercourse with a human female or an alien female with a human male? What happens then? Then you get hybrids, or you get, something that might be an abomination. Something that once again, the physiological aspect. Because whether you guys want to admit it or not, somebody, no matter how that alien looks, is going to want to have intercourse with it. Mm-hmm. That's human beings. I don't know what to tell you. That's just fact. What does that do? So now you have a extraterrestrial human hybrid. How does all that factor in? Viruses, medical care, education, economic way of life, societal issues with upbringing, because people are cruel. Yeah. Half-breed and all that. So then you have more resentment, more disdain for aliens by humans and humans by aliens. And we will look at it like, hey, this was our country first. We were here before you were. So get out. If you don't like it, you can just leave. And I mean, that's human beings. If you don't like it, just leave. But if they're trapped here, and if they can't leave, they don't have a home to go home to, like it was blown up, then what? Then we have a war on our hands. And honestly, to be like 100% honest with you guys, I don't see aliens coming in terms of like 100,000 being a good thing. people say, oh, they might make our way of life better. Listen, they would have to do the most miraculous things possible.
Mm-hmm.
And if
And
they're
be
just
willing
like,
to do
hey,
it.
and be, there you go, and be willing to do it. If not, it's over. And I'm not even talking on an invasion scale like they come here and bomb the place and dip. I'm talking they come here, they're draining our resources. They pretty much drain the planet dry, and then they just move along. Maybe they are like a parasite alien species.
Or maybe they're just big, lazy alien jerks, and they left their planet because they were big, lazy alien jerks, and they showed up here because they knew that we'd be gullible and give them what they needed. And then once we did, then we can't stop them because maybe they are somehow physically more powerful, or there's something about them that makes it so that we can't stop them from doing so, and they're just lazy jerks about it. Like, yeah, so what? What are you going to do? Not a thing. Give me that
Not a
water.
thing.
Give me that soil. Give me that sunlight. It's mine.
It's mine. It's
Stop
mine.
bothering me. Go give me a newspaper.
Go get me a drink,
Give me
but
a
not of your
newspaper
horrible
and drink.
human water.
Yeah.
Go down of your horrible human water. Give me that spicy water that you adults drink out of your bottles. Give me that spicy water.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they could be just
Yeah.
straight out jerks.
Straight up jerks. And we don't account for that. We think that they're going to be like this highly intelligent, more intelligent than human beings. They might be trashier than we are. And human beings are trashy. Let's not front like we're all class. Human beings are trashy. What if they're worse? What if they leave trash out in their yard all day and it's alien trash and it's radioactive and clean it up yourself? We're not doing it. Make us. And they can't. There's nothing they can do to physically hurt them. Maybe they're just impervious to our weaponry. And that was a thought, too, that was given by the Kardashev scale article that I had read earlier for researching that said human beings cannot wipe out because we're at a 0.7 roughly. A 0.7 Kardashev scale civilization cannot wipe out a 2 and above. They can't. They're more powerful. So if they're a 2 or above, or if they're lazy jerks that have that kind of power of 2 or above, nothing we can do. Not a single solitary thing, but just eat it. Some of us. Go ahead.
Even to put it more simply, let's say it's on a political thing. Let's say the dominant political party gets these aliens' votes and says, yeah, you can keep, on the slide, they're like, yeah, you can keep being lazy alien jerks. We don't care as long as you keep voting for us. So then we as a planet aren't going to stop them because they have the side of our corrupt political system that's just letting them continue the poor behavior because they're voting for them, and so they're putting other policies into place whether we want them or not. So it could even be even more simply than that. It might not even be something where we can't threaten them, because then, oh, you're bothering my voting base, you're going to prison.
Yeah.
You went out there and you didn't give my voting base his drink, oh, you're going to prison. You didn't give him his spicy water, oh, you're going to prison. Sorry.
And this is exactly how human beings act. This is how the political system acts to us.
Votes.
Let alone aliens. Like, do you think that's... And especially if these corrupt parties can actually get more votes, we see what happens when they get the votes. Like,
it's so simple.
It's so simple. And they just keep this bay. And that's what happened. That's what happens. That's what happens in a party system. They promise all this stuff, don't deliver, but then they keep the voting base and keep promises. Now you get a whole nother voter base with promises, or out of fear. And the exact opposite could also be true. There could be a species that comes and said, no, you know what? Both of your parties are stupid. We are way smarter. We're going to run the show now. You don't like it? What are you going to do? You're stupid. Can't run anything. We know how to do everything. You know how to do nothing. Stand back. Then it becomes more tyrannical by nature, which leads me to this. In the education system, what would the existence of these aliens actually do to our educational system? Would we have to learn their history? And how is our history altered based on how long they knew about us? If they're already here, that's a whole different thing. You got to start rewriting textbooks. You're going to have college level classes on their science, on their history, on their physiology. So now you're adding more curriculums. Universities make more money. The corruption continues. It doesn't stop. Like, in my honest opinion, I don't think aliens coming to this planet is a good thing. I do not, unless it is of the vein of maybe like 5 or 6 showing up. Then okay, and they're just like, yeah, we just wanted to come over, say hey, we bought you this molecular destabilizer to help with whatever, and we're gonna take off. You guys take it easy. If you need anything, call us. But that is more of a perfect scenario thing. I think it falls under one of the other ideas, like there's maybe 5 or 6, but it's for more of a nefarious purpose, or it's 100,000, and they want to crash on our couch for a few months, which turns into like ever. That's just what I think. I don't see this as a good thing unless they can bring something technologically to the table that we actually need that would actually bring us together. That would not be harnessed for like a weapon of mass destruction. Because you see what happens when people get their hands on science they really don't understand, and we see the devastation that causes. Imagine getting something that's a molecular destabilizer or something like an ion cannon, something like that breaks you down at a molecular level. I mean, that would just be somebody like, and all it would take is that one person to get a hold of it and be like, okay, I know what I'm about to do. And boom, you have disaster. So, I mean, like I said, I don't think that this whole concept of aliens being revealed is necessarily a good thing unless they were already here. Unless they look like us. Or, my other thought behind this was, they are us, and when whatever planet we escaped from or whatever went the way it went, we split off into different groups. And one group said, okay, I'm going to go to this planet. You guys go to that planet. We'll try to meet at each other's planets in 20,000 years, if we make it. If we don't, we miss you, and, we had a good run on our planet. And then they come here, and they mix with what other humanoid creatures were here at the time. And so we have our current civilization, but then the other civilization said, hey, we found a planet, but we want to come back and sort of hang out again and talk about the old times before our other planet exploded. I think in those two situations, you have a positive reinforcement of the idea of the revelation of extraterrestrials. But I think that if you have 100,000 just show up at our doorstep with nowhere to go, you got a problem. That's my opinion. Take it for what it is.
I think, honestly, the best luck we would have isn't having a species show up here. I think it would be finding out that maybe there was some kind of galactic community out there somewhere that has just been kind of like, we've been waiting on you guys to kind of grow up a little bit. If you get out here and you meet us, it's all good. We're not going to go to your
stuff
planet,
together.
though. But, if you come out here, congratulations. Maybe we'll work with you then. I think
kinda
that
like
would
that.
be...
It's kind of like that friend whose house you don't want to go over to, but you always want them to come over to your house.
Yeah. I feel like if there's a community out there that we just can't see yet, and if we manage to get out there and make contact of our own, I think it'll be received better, because then I think they'll be more like, okay, we've left you guys alone because of this. We might have dropped off a few by mistake, but if you guys are going to be cool with the galactic neighborhood, you guys can join us. We'll hang out. We'll share ideas. And I think that's the more likely scenario. Anything where something comes here, either with a problem or just to be like, hey, guys.
It's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a problem.
It's a mess.
If we go out and find it, I think it's going to go a lot better. There's going to be the shock of, oh, my goodness, we went out there and we actually found something.
But I think, too, if we're going out, we're already expecting to find something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, we're going... Yeah, we're like, oh, we're going out. We could run into something. But here on Earth, we're not expecting to run into anything. We're not expecting somebody to come to us. We are more trying to go to them. So, yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's where I think I would be coming from that. Anything that comes to the planet, I think, is going to, even if it's benign looking for help like refugees, I think we're going to view it as a threat in the long term.
Yes.
Because it's going to be a drain. Whereas otherwise, if we go out and found it, the dialogue could open.
Yes. Well, folks, I want to thank you guys for another fantastic hour of this Uncanny Earth. I hope it was nice and thought-provoking for you folks. Let us know in the comments what you think. You can check us out across all major internet platforms that have the podcast, the Podbean, the Spotify, the Apple, the Pandora, the blase, 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 blase. Go check us out. Go listen to all of our previous episodes. Check out the human augmentation episode and check out the Dyson Sphere Stellar Engine episode of This Uncanny Earth, your favorite paranormal podcast. And as always, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks next week.